Hello, everybody. It's Chris Schmidt from Rocket Lasso. Welcome to Season 6, Episode 7 already. Episode 7. How is everyone doing? Let's see. We got people on Twitch. We got some people on YouTube. How is it going, everybody? Hope you're having a good Wednesday and a good week. Yeah, start getting those questions together. As always, I need to see a link to the artist. If it's the artist or studio that's making it, I need to see who made it to give credit. Otherwise, you can just type out a question. And if anybody has a cool looking question you like the sound of, feel free to second it or kind of comment on that question. And then I'll know that there's extra people interested in it. How is it going? I don't have any special news today. Nothing I can specifically think of. Dean's already got a question there. Dean's always got some good ones ready, so we can dive in if need be. Anything? I don't know. I feel like there should be some news, but I don't think there is. We're pushing real hard to get a plugin or two into beta, which hopefully things go quick from that point. So that would be exciting, but nothing I can. Well, you guys have already seen the voxel stuff, and I can't really show off the other one yet. Also, let me see if the laptop is coming in correctly. Excellent, it is. Okay, back here. Okay, I'm gonna tackle, or let's click on Dean's question. Any upcoming guests? No. Does anybody have anybody that you'd like to see? Any suggestions? If they're inside the Cinema 4D community, I probably know them professionally at least. Let me mute that tab just in case sound is coming through. And let's see what we got. I'm going to switch to here. Okay, here's the link. This is from Mario Mario Demeyer, for one of the 36 days of type, which are always really cool. Okay, that looks neat. Oh, nice. I like the way the 5 kind of drifted in there. Yeah, this is a really neat looking piece. That's some, like the way, I like the way the camera zooms in. I'm assuming the camera moved to get really close there. Let's see, is it a perfect loop? That would be, okay, yeah. Well, the camera zooms in and back out again, so it's just adding a little bit more. But that, I really like that moment when it gets, even like right here, it gets really abstract to the point where it just kind of feels like landscape. So I like that a lot. And yeah, look at all these different days of type. Very nice. Now, when it comes to actually a bunch of these, I wonder if they have. Is it in Cinema 4D? I'm not sure if it's Cinema 4D, but I wonder if they have Slicer, because I see a lot of Slicer type things going on here. And of course, Slicer is just a raw tool, so it just helps you create these slices if need be. Although, yeah, looking at these, you wouldn't specifically need Slicer. So I don't think we have to use a plugin to show this one off. So let's jump into the laptop. Here we are in Cinema 4D 24.4. And yeah, let's try it without any plugins. Honestly, I don't even know if a plugin would specifically help in this circumstance. So what we need is a straight line traveling across. Now, my typical workflow these days is actually creating like the end side, or that's not the end side, that's the foreside. Creating a, where's it hiding? There it is, end side. Sorry, I got a bit of glare on the monitor right now. Yeah, end side. And what's cool about the end side is if you drop it to two sides, it actually starts treating it two-dimensionally. Like there's not two lines crisscrossing, it's just one. And I like that the centers from the center point. Now you can't get great subdivisions here, but then it wouldn't be unusual for me to throw that now into a utility spline. And then via using this resample, I could type in like exactly however many points I wanted to be along that line. If I double click on that icon, you can now see there's 100 points along. I could type in 10, and now there's 10 points along the entire thing. So yeah, resample is really great for that. But we don't, or let's do it without plugins. So we could maybe say subdivided. It's a little more visually, like it's not literal anymore. Like I'm not quite sure how many points are being created there. But I think we can maybe do it that way. I'm trying to think of this reason to switch to a helix, but let's stick with that. Put into a cloner and drop it to 1. And I'm not sure how much spacing we want, so let's just say 10. And now I can make, this is per step, so I can crank this up, make more copies. And essentially, this is our field that we're going to be manipulating. And yeah. So here's going to be the trick. We're going to throw that into a connect object. And that's now going to essentially bake it down. Let's not weld. It bakes it down, so this is being seen as a single spline, essentially, a singular spline object. So now I'm going to want to do some sort of deformation on it. So I'll make a plane effector, drop that on the line, and set it to deform the points. And currently all the points are, in theory, I didn't make it a child. We should have seen it move. There we go. So now you can see they all move. So yeah, it's based on the node. I should say based on the effector. So they're pushing straight up and Y. It's just, I know for a fact that's working now. I'll type in 200. That will be too much. And now everything essentially is being deformed to move upward, but we don't want everywhere to be deformed. So we can do any kind of fall off we want, but it might be relatively straightforward now that I think about it. Now, maybe we can do it with a spline mask. I'll make a text spline and center it, and we'll just, if we want a single character, we'll go with our old friend, the ampersand. I'm going to leave it on this font for now. Oops. Boop, boop, boop. Okay. And click off of it, then hit R. I typed in R for rotate, and it flipped the entire thing down. So we'll spin that downward. So it's been interesting to me that the, oh wait, what am I talking about? There we go. Now I can lay it flat. Oop. Cool. Okay, so let's view it from the top and get this to fill up the space pretty well. We might end up shrinking it down a little bit. And actually, here's what I'll do. I'll make the end side bigger, T for scale the whole thing up. And now we can make that letter bigger to fill up the space a little bit more. And just eyeball it to be about center. I'll drop it as a child of the plane just so I associate those two things with each other. And inside the fields, I will say you are now limited to the text spline. Now, if I click on here, you can see it looks kind of like nonsense. It's still kind of cool. And let me show you some cool things you do here. Is we are deforming all of the points, but it's deforming by a curve. So it kind of spins around the entire spline. But is there an automatic animation for that? There's not, but we could keyframe something like this offset. And I guess the offset doesn't spin. Well, if we make a curve, so let me make a curve, I think we could give an animation speed, let's say 90, and see what happens. Yeah, so that's moving. But I'm going to say after curve, don't clamp. I'll say loop. So now you see that that line is constantly traveling around, kind of making a kind of a weird, cool effect. But we're not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to change our text spline. We could do two different ones. One would be change it from along to radius. And now you can see, let's visually hide the text spline. Why is that? That's interesting. Why is my... Look, I'm visually hiding the text spline. Oh, that makes sense. I'm going to pull this out. This was in the connect object, so it was connecting and then showing up. It's like, that can't be right. That's not the type of bug that would end up in Cinema. So let's do a couple things. First of all, I got to make sure that, yeah, that's laying right there. So now hiding it, go to text spline. We've got a radius, but kind of surprisingly, that feels like it's, oh, okay. Let me think. It's not applying to connect. Sorry, making a couple of silly mistakes here. So we got to make a null, so it's actually applying to it, but it's not inside the connect. There we go. So now, like I said, we are definitely gonna be pushing up too high. So, oh, that's weird. It's every time I click, it's refreshing. It's like doing this alternating refresh, which is a little strange. The plane effector doesn't have it in there. No. Yeah, I'm not so. Oh, I do know. I think I know why that's happening. This is supposed to be really simple. I'm surprised we're bumping into these little bits of trouble here. So I think the trouble is we're getting a feedback loop here where we are. Yeah, this makes sense. How do we stop that? Text. Is there a setting for this? Well, anyway, what's happening right now is a feedback loop is happening where it's saying to deform this geometry based on it intersecting with the text spline. So it's like, okay, I'll deform it. And then the next refresh, it's like, oh, wait, these splines aren't touching the text spline radius anymore. And then they fall back down. So we get this infinite loop going back and forth. Now, that's a surprisingly tricky thing to do. There's a way a vertex map has like a deform checkbox to deal with that, but these settings don't have that in any specific way. So I'm trying to think of how I want to actually apply that. After we're done with this, we could probably redo this entire project in like 5 minutes. But right now we're bumping into some little things. But at least all the things we're bumping into are logical. So yes, actually, Thurl, can you THRL? Can you type out phonetically how you'd like your name to be pronounced? Because you're definitely a regular, and I don't know if it should be. I think I've said it is a twirl, all right. But what would you actually want that to be? But anyway, yeah, they're suggesting that I swap this to mask, which is what I was originally going to go to, but I kind of wanted to show the way you could work with this. So we get that twitching back and forth. I wanted to show that radius was an option. Ultimately, I was going to switch this to mask mode, but I do want to show how you might make this work with radius if you did want a radius. Because if we drew out a spline instead of it being doubly thick, you'd want to be running from the radius. So I'm thinking that Scott, I'm not a fan of clicking on like Dropbox links and like Google Drive links. Like we're supposed to be kind of just checking out stuff generically, not like somebody's personal project or, I definitely don't want to be downloading a virus or something. Not that I think you would do that, but I'll try to be careful. Anyway, I can think of several different ways of doing this. The one that's popping into my head right now is making it a vertex map, which I think we can do with a spline. So if I make a vertex map on the original thing, and now instead of driving this with the plane effector, or we are going to use a plane effector, but I'm going to pull out the text spline, tell this to view the text spline as a radius. And now that radius is getting applied. And now here, I'm going to say, don't look at the text spline. We don't care about that. Instead, look at the vertex map. And now you see that we get the deformed state. And as I keep clicking, you're going to see it's going to keep on alternating. But the vertex map, is it in here? Yeah, in here, you can see that it can say it'll use the deformed points or not the deformed points. So I'm going to say don't use the deformed points. Oh, no, that's still alternating. That's a bit of a pain. Okay, that's going in. It's getting deformed, which is again sort of moving it out. The vertex map I could make a copy of it. I mean, now we're starting to get lost in the weeds. I don't want it to get complicated, so we'll just jump right to the mask thing. There are some more complicated rigs we could do to make it acknowledge that properly, but that was me going on a tangent anyway. So we will drop this in, put it on mask mode. Now it's actually projecting based on the mask of the text, but it's coming from top down. So we want to set it to a long Y. And now you see we get a very clean version of what we were going for. So yeah, that looks fine. Looks cool. You do get these nice fall offs that we can do. So we can increase that as large or small as we want. And right now they're linear, but we'll modify that. But for now, it's deforming up too high. So if we're kind of matching the reference, let's calm that way down. Let's try 50. Yeah, 50 seems okay. And I gave it a relatively large radius, but let's immediately control the curve of this. It's really clean right now. We could go and change the remapping and then modify the curve mode. I kind of like just separating it out. So I'll make a curve here. And now selecting our points, I should be able to hit Control or Command A, grab both handles, and then kind of get this S curve going. And now you see I'm reshaping the curve. So you can do all sorts of crazy shapes here. But keeping it simple, we could do that. And now we kind of get this ease in, ease out, eases in, quickly goes up, and then eases back out again. And you cleanly see the text getting projected up on the top. Excellent. Now, in this case, usually we're trying to get a beefy font, but I think something really, I guess regular is as thin as this one gets, but like a thinner font would go a long way here. So now we've got a whole bunch of lines deforming. And there's multiple different ways to do this, but what I'm thinking, hopefully this will work, is we're deforming that. we don't want the text getting deformed, but I think I do want the final geometry. So I'm going to deform that. So now you see the same things happening. So we get one connect and it's getting deformed. And then I'll make a duplicate of this one. Hold down Control and make a copy. And I'm going to call this one flat, and we'll call this one deformed. So we get two of them. In theory, we could make an instance of it. So if we made changes, I mean, should we just do that right away? We got the flat one. Let's see if that does work. I'll just delete the deformed one. Let's make an instance so it's a little bit more controllable of a rig. Drop it in. And actually, I hit undo a few times because I need this to rescue my plane effector. Cool. Make the instance. Now we got our duplicate. And now I'll deform the instance. So now you see I've got a flat line, and then we've got one deforming upward. So hopefully that's all we really need to do, because now we can feed both of those into a loft. So we make a loft, drop both of them inside of it, and there we go. Let's activate our SSAO. So now you can start seeing the separation between them. Now the loft is kind of doing its own subdivision, which, yeah, I'm a little surprised that I thought I'd just take on the point, but yeah, that's the way loft behaves. We can drop these subdivisions down because we don't need those. I can turn off this per segment because we don't need that geometry, and we can just add in plenty here so it starts looking nice and smooth. So yeah, those all just layer up perfectly. And because it's based on an instance, it's really easy for us to go back in here and decrease the count or increase the spacing between them. It looks like it might need a single. Oh wait, it's actually this one, so we can increase that and separate them out more. So you can see we've got a rig with a lot of different controls. Connect. I should probably move that one first, just because that one calculates first. Probably doesn't make too much of a difference. So yeah, now we see that. I just have to take a peek at the reference to see. I think that, yeah, the colors are just purely based on the height. So yeah, let's do something along those lines. I want this to be wider, so T for scale. Make those just go way off the screen. Throw in a few extra subdivisions in here. Make it smooth. Excellent. And yeah, we'll apply a redshift material on here. We should be able to handle that. I'll give this a quick save. I actually forgot to prep a folder for myself. So let me jump over here, create a episode 6 link. That's in a strange spot. Give me 1 second here. Boop. Yeah, that's not what I'm expecting. Yeah, episode 6 is supposed to not just be living as episode 6. It's supposed to be in some sort of other folder, which I can't find. So I will just make a duplicate. Oh, I think I know why that was there, because I wanted to play with those particle files. Okay, back over here. Okay, now episode 7, scene files, 1A. Now, there would be, there's a lot of different potential ways to go about doing this. Like, in theory, you could have had just a really thin strip of geometry and deformed only the little top half of it. I wanted these two lines to be able to go like super thin. In fact, in the reference, I think that there's always a little bit of a gap. So we could take the secondary one, and it's an instance, so we should be able to just physically move it up. So I guess this one, yeah, I'll physically move it up so you can see that the lines always have a little bit of thickness. So that's an option. We put the whole thing in subdivision surface if we wanted to. But let's jump into our materials, double click, apply this to the loft, and immediately set this to be a flat projection. And here you can see what the projection looks like. View this from the side, T for scale, scale this down until it's pretty much perfectly matching. Doesn't have to be exactly on it, but I want it to be close. And as long as I don't change the deformation to go up higher, that should be completely fine. Cool. So now we can go into our material and let's make a ramp. Drop the ramp into the color channel. I mean, this was probably more in the luminance channel if we're trying to attempt to aim for the style. I might even go double bright on that. Kill off reflection, kill off color, drag that to the color channel. Inside of the gradient, I'm going to load in one of my many presets I've been building. Let's grab sunset. Cool. And that should be getting mapped. Now, unfortunately, ramps and redshift just don't show up in the viewport. I really wish they did, but we should be able to open up redshift. Hit go. There we go. Now, I did put the double brightness, which is it a good idea? Maybe not. I'll just set it to 1 to be perfectly luminant. And let's invert the gradient. Yeah, I like that a little bit better. So they're dark and they kind of get brighter as they go. It's a little bright on the edge. I'm going to pull that down and then distribute. There we go. I like that. So yeah, that is, that's the rig right now. And all the future work and all the other stuff that we need to do on it is going to be figuring out how we want it to animate in or just getting some animation going. And all of that work will just be done in this plane effector. So right now we've got the curve and the text spline going, but we can manipulate that however we like. So a random field, right here you see all this deformation everywhere. For the most part, I think we're just going to leave this here and set as multiply and start making our scale large enough that we can get some nice clean coherence on there. And potentially I'd put a curve on that as well. And for that one, I'd probably want to make a folder. Now we already know there's a lot of trouble with folders. At least last time we had tons of bugs with folders. So I'll make a folder with nothing selected, drop that inside, and it disappeared. So we're immediately getting folder trouble. So if we're going to get folder trouble, I'm not going to mess with a folder. If anybody from Maxon's in the chat, we got folder bugs. So I'll just remap it inside of itself. I don't like going to curve because it's so far down in the scroll that you have to like fight to get down here. But yeah, I'm just going to increase the contrast of our noise. It's kind of weird that the default one, these two handles aren't the same length. But yeah, by increasing the contrast of the noise, because all noises are sort of floating in the middle gray and they tend not to get to white and they tend not to get to black. So you don't get the full kind of range of the noise. So putting a little bit of an S curve in there goes a really long way to getting the contrast being like really high. Crank up some animation speed on there. Hit play. We can get some lovely animation going. Now, I don't see any need for us to do like the full animation. I'm just showing you some of the techniques. So this type of thing where you could have that animated and then over time you could blend this so it's like full power or fades out. We can, turn off that curve and alternatively or additionally make a linear field and set that one also to multiply. And now if you wanted to, you could have, go to object mode, and we could erase it all out and I'll fade through, revealing the text, increase that, rotate it into a different orientation, get a slight angle on it, and now we can slowly fade it up that way. Yeah, again, we kind of need a folder for that to work, but I could even see moving the noise up here and setting that to overlay. That's going to not be perfect, but without the folder. But we can pass this through and they have like an animated noise fading through getting applied. Yep. So I dig it. We drag that anywhere we like and just check out redshift. Oh yeah, you get your perfect transition traveling in there. And at this point, most people here are going to know perfect loop type stuff where you can animate that through and then animate it back again or fade it out via any series of keyframes. And the rest of that animation was zooming in slowly and then zooming your way back out again. Or maybe, I guess you'd need to zoom in and zoom out and you get your perfect loop. If anybody has any specific follow-ups on this, let me know. We can do some more tinkering with it if we want to. Obviously, there's always more you can do. It's a nice, clean, at this point, it's pretty clean parametric rig where we can always go back and change what we want to type in. And, automatically, well, let me type in capital A. And yeah, you see that now refreshed. And our linear field can pass through. And we can, you can push things further and further and further. This is deforming that. This is our original text, but I'm going to duplicate the cloner, R for rotate, and spin the entire thing 90 degrees. And look at that. Now we get this cool, like, two-dimensional grid going back and forth, giving us these deformations. So like some extra detail on there. I dig that. In theory, you could apply, if we separated these rigs as two copies, like you have one deform a little bit more than the other, you could colorize them differently. Even the idea of maybe you have a horizontal and a vertical one. Let's say you're going through the whole alphabet, where it's like, oh, you reveal a horizontal one and it's A, and then you fade it out. And as you're fading out, you have the other one come in horizontally, and that one's B. You just kind of keep alternating between those two, and you get a completely different look on that. Let's go back to Redshift. Check out the double layer. Yeah, it's pretty cool looking. Getting that type of shape. There's options and options and options on top of all of this. Go back to this is the loft. So we grab the loft. I'll save it because everything's looking good. Throw that into thicken. I do like thicken. We don't end up using it very often, but it works well. And this is a pretty simple use case of thicken. So I think we could get away with it being in basic mode. I almost never use basic mode, but this couldn't be cleaner. And twirl. That's a good point. This would look really cool 3D printed, where if you walked in on it straight on, like you put it in. I'm picturing you 3D print it. Actually, you could laser cut it as well because they're all just slotted angles. But if you had it at the end of a hallway, when you walked towards it, it would look flat, or you wouldn't be able to see anything. And as you approach from the side, suddenly the depth would pop in. That's a pretty cool idea. I like it. But yeah, adding thickness there. Probably needs to move the material up one. And you can see we'll get some thickness on there. I think thicken probably creates some selections for us. So yeah, there's shell, cap, and the caps. I think the caps are what I'm interested in. So if we were to duplicate our material, or maybe not even duplicate it, I'll just make a copy of the same material, but I'll hit T for scale and scale the material up to be a bit bigger. And now we've got a second material that's not quite lining up the exact same way. I'm going to say that's the edges. Those are points. Shell, cap. So I think we want the shell. So I'm going to activate the shell. It exposes the tag. And now I'll say this second material, only look at that tag. Yeah, and now you can see that the cap has a slightly different color applied, just because it's the same material, but scaled slightly differently. Just if you wanted that to pop a little bit. Maybe I'll swap that to the other material just to see if that looks better. And it has to be second. Yeah, I like that one better. So the top's a little bit extra bright than what the edges would be. Anyway, those are just like cool additional options to throw on there. Hit undo a few times. I'm going to leave it back in the simple form. Oh, that's interesting. Refresh, bud. If I turn on this tag and hit undo, it doesn't disappear. But if you turn it off physically, it does disappear. Anyway, any follow-up? Tobias, you're not wrong. We could do a little bit of subsurface scattering. That could be cool. The thicken should have done a fine job. So I'll save this version. And I'm not sure what it's going to look like on the intersections, but let's try that. So instead of luminance, or I still sometimes call emission luminance, we will use our subsurface, and we'll expose that color, drop this in, and I'll make it fully subsurface scatter based. And now we can bring like reflection back in again, because we're starting to modify things a bit. Immediately you can see that this is starting to dramatically change. These intersections definitely wouldn't, we might have to do, if we wanted them to work properly, we probably have to do some work to make sure that they weren't intersecting in some way, because you see we're getting some weird subsurface stuff where they do. For simplicity's sake, I'll just turn off one layer, and it's interesting. Stop generating anything. So I might just I'll yank one of them out, because for some reason it doesn't like it being in this hierarchy turned off. Not the biggest deal. I wonder if them being in a single loft was doing that. but let's reactivate that. Yeah, so with single layers, yeah, get the subsurface going. You get the little highlights on the edge. And I'll put some more layers in there because that could look cool. So cloner, put only 10 units between there. So now they get layered up a little bit more. Make a few extra lines. So those really got layered. And now let's get some lighting. So I'll save this as B just because I don't want to mess it up. We can go into the HDR folder and we get all these different HDRs. Just with how kind of a sunset thing, do we double down on the sunset-ish just to give it something to reflect? If you drag an HDR, don't land on an object, but land on the empty space. It'll automatically download and it will automatically create a dome light for you. So let's refresh this and hopefully, yeah, now you see that we've got some lighting in there. Now that was just to give us some overall ambience because then I'm going to create a regular area light, hit R, rotate it properly. Remember, if you rotate your light first, then it's really easy to be like, and scoot backward. If you try and scoot it, then it's really hard to rotate. So I kind of want to get some rear light going on here just because, it's all subsurface. So yeah, now you can see the subsurface going through real nice. I'm not quite sure what their overall scale is with kind of an arbitrary size. There you see a figure. So, that's like a few inches thick. So the subsurface could be, I would mostly just play with the subsurface and be like, all right, well, what happens if we have the scale be 10? So now very, very blown out, but you see very transparent looking, which could be cool. Or you can go real thin, like instead of 1, do 0.1. So I did 10 times bigger, 10 times smaller, and now subsurface is barely doing anything. So you just find what you like it to be in between. You all know that I like kind of going overboard, which gives me a good idea of what I want it to be, and then pull back again. At this point, this is crying out for, let's see, several things we could do. I want a bevel. I want some more subdivisions going here. You see these edges are getting a little bit thick or a little chunky. So we'll grab our loft. It's already heavily subdivided, but let's jump it up to 400. That's interesting. That's implying by cranking this up, I think the actual incoming splines are now no longer subdivided enough. Oh yeah, because we did increase the maximum length. So if I do that now, yeah, the curve starts coming back in again. A little bit more. Let's just make sure that the data is there so that the subdivisions can see it. And yeah, obviously there's going to be making the animations go slower, but make ourselves the flat doesn't have a built-in bevel, does it? No. Advanced? No. I was just making sure. So yeah, I can't think of any better way of doing that than just making a bevel. And yeah, it's already got the angle threshold by default, so we'll just move it in the thicken. And now we get the bevel. I want it to be 0.5, and we'll give it 3 subdivisions. So you can already feel like it chugging as it tries to figure out that calculation. I'll go back up to 1. Subdivisions will probably make that look okay. And then I'm not sure, but let's grab that Fong, and I'm going to set the Fong to be square area weighted. I'm not sure if that will actually change anything, but it's just a better looking Fong. Potentially it can be dropped on the thicken, but I'm not sure the thicken respects, if it just consumes what came in below. But anyway, you can now see like on these corners, so we get these nice beveled highlights that we wouldn't have been getting before. Those little bevels go like a really long way. Now, obviously, if we were playing in the viewport, I would turn the bevel off until I'm done with all my animation and then reactivate at the end. I mean, by turning off this bevel and turning off the thicken, we get everything back to like working real time again. But I'm sure thicken might be okay because we're using simple thicken. Yeah, the refresh is okay, but the bevel is going to like completely kill it. You see how long it takes for a single one to figure itself out. But yep, there's that. Keep in mind, right now these are all the same color going across. I liked the way it looked before, but I thought it would be fun to explore a little bit. But we get all these layers traveling along. We could stack these layers up even tighter. We could project a material or maybe even a secondary material from the top point of view. So like each one gets a slightly different color going across. There's a lot of different ways we could layer this up and create additional effects. But unless anybody has a specific follow-up question, I think I will end this one here. But I wouldn't mind us spending a little bit more time in the render occasionally just to make, try and make things look a little bit nicer. Because it's a kind of a dim HDR, I might double the brightness of that. And I mean, we didn't spend much time doing lighting here, but always take your HDR and spin it around and see if you can catch like a better angle. I can feel a little bit of shadow and a little bit of warmth moving around with it. This one was very low on the horizon, so I don't think it's doing all that much for us. I might like move it there just so we catch these warm highlights on the bottom side. But is the N side point type linear? It's default, which means it is currently, it's not, it's subdivided and it's perfectly flat. So there's just a certain number of points across it. And those points don't increase in their count as they got deformed upward and they got deformed downward. Keep in mind, I made an instance of our original clones, and that means both copies have the exact same point count, and the exact same point count's probably pretty important for the loft. You probably get some pretty weird effects if they had different point counts. So you want the flat duplicate that's not doing anything to be the exact same point count and lined up. Just for one last thing, yeah, that does look nice. For one last thing, just because it popped in my head, I wonder what it would look like if we made the effect mirror. So the bottom one is also getting deformed, but that deformation is getting pushed downward. In order to show that, I'm actually going to take the original, pull it out entirely, put it into a null and tell that null not to show up, and then make a second instance of it. So now there's two instances. I probably got to scoot one of them up or down. Bevel off. Oh, actually, even layering on that, look, if we deform both of them and just offset them, you can get this little thin strip going, which could be a different but also cool effect. So keep that in mind. But now with that duplicate, I'll just grab one plane effector. Probably be nice to put all these into a group field. I like everything being instances whenever possible, duplicates, so I don't have to change parameters on two things. But just keeping the simple, I'll just set this plane effector to be deforming negative direction. And yeah, you see one's deforming. It looks like they're in slightly backwards order, so I'll just scoot that downward. Yeah, there we go. So now one's up, one's down. They get deformed identically. We wouldn't have to make them be deformed identically. But yeah, you don't see much of it here. But depending on what you're doing with your camera, here you're getting deformation above and below, which could be pretty cool. And then I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think of a way. I'm not thinking of an easy way, but a way that's like almost you don't see anything unless they started deforming upwards, so they kind of would fade out to nothing. Yeah, I mean, I can think of, I can just keep on thinking of more and more additional effects that we could layer up on top of this. I'm curious about it. So does the thicken has a thickness map. So could we feed it that same mask? That would be interesting. I wonder if I can just copy my field list here. And where does, this is the geometry. So this would get a vertex map. That vertex map is where I paste all of this stuff. There's a lot of extra information going on there. But I think that might be all we need. And now in thicken, can I drop that in as a thickness map? We can. It instantly worked properly. And now you can see that we end up with, I can make that thin line. I didn't, this was never going to make it invisible. I guess we can make it so thin that maybe technically it could be invisible. But let me grab this height and say 0 and grab this one. And that one's got to be a little bit extra. So I'll just say 0.1. So now it's very thin above. And now we get this very thin line that not only is very thin vertically, but it's also very thin horizontally, because you can see that the thickness gets thicker as it goes up as well. So, again, we're just tinkering around there. We get a very, in theory, let's see. Yeah, a pretty cool different effect. Like the line is still existing. Potentially we could put like an alpha or something on that. And maybe we could be real clever and try and completely hide it. That wasn't specifically my goal. But yeah, getting the different thicknesses there. I would probably remap that where this would be pretty thick. It would rapidly get up to the proper thickness quickly. But I like that. Yeah. So it's kind of weird and cool. I dig it. Because it gets so thin, it looks like the color starts blowing out, which is also interesting. But I dig it. I'll save it and close that, and let's move on to another question, unless I see that people have follow-ups. John is saying that there's a 4.1 update, which I didn't realize that there had been an update. Because I do beta testing for Maxon, I manually download my versions, so I miss when there's updates sometimes. So thanks for the heads up. I'll be trying to download that. Let's see. Lately, I've been trying to use segment object instead of the end side. Segment. When you say segment, do you mean the capsule? There's a segment capsule that you can use. I just don't. It was made very early on. It probably is. It's probably completely functional. I mean, obviously I spend tons of my time working on spline stuff. So yeah, the segment is not an official cinema object, but it super works. So yeah, it's valid. Maybe I just haven't gotten into the habit of that, where I still have in my head where I'm trying to keep things as vanilla as possible. But these are pretty much, capsule stuff is in vanilla cinema. So yeah, using the segment. Now you won't find segment in your spline dropdown. I don't think they put it in there. But you can just search for the word segment, and there's the segment spline, which, yeah, straight line that you can subdivide. I think it does some weird additional things as well, but yeah, it's there. Boop. Ooh, friend of motion. How to use a sound modifier with particles? I mean, I guess you could technically use a sound modifier in a field condition, and you can also use it on a cloner that's cloning onto them. Let me. I'm going to switch here. I'm going to see if I have a folder synced, because I think I have a quick go-to folder. But not there. I had a folder that I have prepared for Cinema 4D assets. Nope. Nope. I do have a, oh, well, okay. I did find my old-timey music folder, which I think is copyright free. And I don't think any audio is going to go through. I don't have it rigged up to even have the audio go through, but I think we could just display it. So I'm going to go back to my laptop. Let's just see if we can get something to acknowledge these. So keeping it real simple, I'll make a matrix object, make a plane effector. Inside the plane effector, I'll make a sound field. In the sound field, we need to drag in some sort of audio. I don't know. Let's try waiting for a train. Can I drag it in? unknown format. Nope, it didn't like that, so I have to load it. Yeah, very weird loading interface there. So I'll copy the location, go here, drop that, and now load it in. I don't even know what this audio sounds like. If I hit play, yeah, you can see that at least we have some audio playing, and we can move our probe wherever we like, so you can see it's actually having some effect. If we lower this down, there'll be more power. We can move into different areas, and that seems to be, that's going to give us something. I think it's a very fast bit of audio, but you can see it's doing something. So let's see if we can make that now translate in some way into particles. So we don't need anything too fancy. So basic emitter, and we'll do a shot of 1,002 particles. And they'll make the particle group extra large. So we just have a burst of particles. They will be flying forward, and that's fine. We can see those well enough. So if I make a field condition, the field condition is going to do something based on a field. Combine and or condition. So field condition, if we just drag in that same sound field, but this is just saying combine. Yeah, this is okay, we can't use a field condition. I think we want a data mapper. Let's make a color mapper. Yeah, we'll make a color mapper. I think that would work fine. Inside the field, we'll now drag the sound field and remapping, color remapping. I'm going to say map via a gradient. And now we can definitely see it's reacting. And we'll just load in something a little bit more colorful. And that epilepsy warning. You can now see it rapidly changing colors, and the colors are changing based on the sound. We could probably, just because it's so intense, let's just grab a slightly calmer one. There we go. But yeah, the sound is so rapidly going up, down, up, down, up, down, that you can see how chaotic that is. Inside of the color mapper, we can still use all of our other fields, I think. So we could grab a delay. And yeah, by putting a little bit of smoothing in there, that's going to calm it down significantly. If you go too high, it's just going to kind of blur into nothing. But yeah, that's the sound field driving directly into stuff. And we can do that via, you get the field condition. The field condition is merely a threshold. So it's kind of like you could make a trigger to be like, oh, if the sound ever goes above this volume, it'll suddenly do something else. And then the ones I think will be more interesting are going to be using the color mapper and the data mapper. So we could also make a data mapper. And I'll say this is also using a field. We'll say it's also using the sound field. So now it's taking this information, and now it's going to drive some other property. The most visually obvious one maybe would be radius. So I'm going to grab the radius and say the lowest this is changing is going to be 0, and they'll go up to, let's say, 5. And let's make sure that our particle group is actually displaying the radius. So now let's turn off the color. Now you can see that the radius is very rapidly changing based on the audio as well. Now, if this audio was a little calmer where the sounds are going up and down, I mean, why don't we try loading in a different sound? Maybe one of these other ones, maybe it'd be a little calmer. Unfortunately, these are like really fast, old-timey jigs. So I don't know that my particular collection of old-timey songs are going to be giving us anything overly calm. Yeah, a little bit of something. Hopefully that shows you that, yes, indeed, you can drive particles very directly with fields by remapping their data or remapping their color or creating a particular trigger based on a field condition. And the field condition, like I said, it's just got that threshold. So it's just like, yes, it's happening, or no, it's not happening. There's no in between. So I suppose, just to show you, what's interesting is that this is an and. It's just merely It's just merely meeting the threshold or not meeting it. It's not actually driving anything. So you actually have to put that as a subcondition of something. So I could make a, oh no, that makes sense. We'll do that. And then we'll make a math. And you'll see here, I'm going to say math. I want to add onto position Y 10. Okay. So now you see that this is constantly going upward. Like every frame, it's saying go up 10 higher, go up 10 higher, go up 10 higher. Now I'm going to drop it underneath the field condition. And now you see, well, let's see if it's, yeah. So now you see whenever the audio is hitting hard enough, you'll suddenly see it goes up, up. So yeah, you can get those types of options. And that's all going to be based on our sound probe. So if I lower that down, and keep in mind our threshold is about 50%. So that means this has to be more than 50% full of audio of that waveform in order for it to trigger to go upward. But yeah, I think that covers all the direct possibilities. And always remember that you can, we've got our field group here. So that's what the particles actually are. So I could make a cloner. Inside the cloner, we'll just make a sphere, clone onto an object. The object will be the particle group. We can say, hey, scaled based on the particle, which I think are we still driving the radius? Maybe, maybe not. But yeah, you can see the radius is getting affected by what was built in, but we can get rid of that. And now I've just got the straight up cloner that's just taking on the position information for the most part. And you can use your regular effectors to do anything. Like you could just directly use the sound effector on the cloner, and that would also work. Sound. So yeah, load in audio. I think it's actually a different song. Bum, ba-dum, bum, bum, bum. So now, yeah, the sound is affecting the Y position. Let's have it affect the Z. So now we got sound doing certain things via particles and certain things via the cloner directly. So not the best like practical use case of it, but you see the technical side of it. Cool. John was asking over on YouTube, did we ever discuss the partition modifier anywhere? It's a good question. I recorded a tutorial, but I don't know if that's gotten posted onto Cineversity yet. So we could pop it open. It's pretty cool. So this goes back. This is a capsule made by Lasso. I suppose it's possible that somebody here in the live audience doesn't know that Lasso has been working directly with Maxon to make a bunch of capsules, which are pretty cool. If I were to open up my asset browser, and I'll just say auto or even all, and now I can search for the word Rocket Lasso, you're going to see a bunch of stuff up here. Now, I should note you're going to see certain things if you have a Cinema 4D subscription, and you'll see more things if you have a Maxon 1 subscription. So anyway, you can see a whole bunch of, here's the actual capsules that we've made, and here's a whole bunch of example files showing them off. Now, John is asking about the partition modifier, which I have not really talked about too much. So it's pretty cool. Let me pop open a plane. And I'm going to get rid of all subdivisions, just keep it as simple as possible. Search for partition, and there you go, partition modifier, drop it in. And immediately, you're going to see that it's randomly subdividing the mesh. Now, important thing to note right away is these are each essentially independent polygons. They are not connected in any way, and there is no way to connect them because like that polygon is just terminating there. You'll see right now we are looking at our polygon line, so it's as kind of clean and optimized as possible. Everything is disconnected. Having said that, yeah, now we've got those. They're there. They are static, but we have all these different controls. Let me lower the density and the random cuts, and you can kind of see it in a little bit more uniform light. So we got all these different subdivision types. So I could start increasing this. So you can see I make more or fewer of them. And now that we have a decent amount of subdivisions, I could do something like grab my random cuts. And as I increase that, you're going to see that every cut, actually, let me show you that as a single. So in the beginning, we just have a single polygon. If we say make a cut, then now it's going to make one cut. And right now it's saying that there's no randomness. So it cuts it right down the middle. It also says that the cut orientation is going to be alternating. So each piece, this piece knows that it just got a horizontal cut. So when the next cut happens, it creates one. It's like, oh, well, this object was cut horizontal, so now it needs to be vertical. Now the next it's always going to be cutting the next biggest piece essentially. And that means that is the next one. So if I say cut again, you see it is also cut vertically. And if we keep on going, each piece will alternate being cut vertically and then cut horizontally. And as long as we do kind of these mathematically even numbers, you can see that everything kind of fills in before the next one goes. So as a way of making it a little bit smoother for people using it, you can just click on double mode. And now you can see that every time it's going to double, 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 double. So you get these even subdivisions, or you can say quad. So as you increase it, essentially every polygon gets chopped into 4 polygons. But if we go back to a single one, let's just do a handful of cuts, like 2. We can grab our randomized cuts and start offsetting them. And you'll see that the first cut just randomly got placed somewhere along the line there, up to 80% offset. And then the next one's getting cut, and it can be up to 80% offset. So if we go back to quad, we can end up getting a decent number of subdivisions. Let's do that. And now I can start offsetting these, and you're going to see, kind of how each subsequent cut is getting a little bit more, offset or smaller or squished based on any others. You get some pretty cool different layouts that way. The next and most important setting is the random density, where, remember I said, is always going to be cutting the next one in sequence. Well, this one's going to say, well, they don't have to be in sequence. Generally speaking, they will be. But as I start increasing this, you're going to see that it's like, oh, that one got cut 1 less time, and this one got cut 1 extra time. If you keep on doing that, you can start ending up with a lot of variation in scale. So now you start seeing this like, oh, this one's barely gotten cut at all, but over here they're starting to get pretty tiny. And if we go up to like maximum, let's even go back to the single, and I'll just create more and more cuts. So you can see as I keep going that we can start ending up with these very heavily subdivided pieces that can get really tiny. So here you see we got a big one and we get some little tiny ones. So those are the 2 primary controls for creating randomness. And if you combine those 2 things, you get like maximum randomness. We can say, hey, now you're randomly cut in kind of length, and you're cut via like randomly choosing which ones should be cut. So yeah, I super dig this tool overall. We got additional settings like this random gap. So we can increase this, and you see you get more or less thickness there, which is excellent. And then what are some things? Randomized order, that makes sense. Polygon orientation. If I get rid of this randomness, we can go back. Let me go to something kind of reasonable, and I'll say, give me some random animation. Now, random animation is very similar to the random cuts, but if I increase this, you see, okay, they're getting offset in a very similar way. But there's now some animation speed. So if I play, we're going to get some automatic noise-based animation layering these all up. So yeah, create some interesting opportunities there. And get rid of that. Now there's a lot of different things that we can do here. We've got multiple different cut algorithms. Oh, and actually I totally forgot about a really important one. Let's get some random going. So a really important one is skew. If we start adding some skew, you can see you actually twist these, and each one can be randomly cutting. So you get some pretty cool shattering looking effects as well. So get more cuts, and they can look more and more and more shattered. Cool. And then so then there's additional settings like our different algorithms. So we got the simple algorithm, which kind of means everything's internally happening. But then we've got a different algorithm, which will be dynamically checking to see what the largest piece is and calculating on that. And then down in our cut orientation, we've got some pretty cool settings. We'll do that one first. So right now it's alternating. You saw that every piece is randomly alternating it's not randomly, it's alternating if it's going to cut horizontal or vertical. But when you change this to be manual, and now you see it's by default set to 50%, so it's randomly getting applied. But what's cool about manual is, first of all, you see these kind of random planks going on, but I could say, hey, I want these almost all of them to be vertical, or I could go all the way and say, okay, every cut is completely vertical. So I could make only a certain number of cuts and randomize the density, randomize, how the cuts are splitting off from each other. And then where the power really comes in is duplicating the modifier. And now it's happening a second time. So now the second one I'm gonna say, but now your cut orientation will be completely the opposite. It's cutting horizontally. So here's how you can make like a lot of different effects, where here, now it's like we got a bunch of planks going along, or maybe like fence posts. And now I make a second one, give it the opposite orientation. And now via these settings, I can spread this out. And now you see we get these cool subdivisions on the overall planks. Let's see. I'm going to say no gap on the first one. So now the gap is appearing purely from the second one. So I can put as much space in there as I want. We could make extra cuts. So yeah, I can just keep on going. And keep in mind, you keep on alternating more and more and more. Now I've made a bunch of vertical cuts and then horizontal cuts, and I'll duplicate that horizontal cut one again. And now you see that we start getting a couple extra cuts here. So instead of just making the tool, instead of making we've been doing this more and more wherever we can, instead of making a tool that is constantly, or that tries to do everything for you, we make it so you can layer it up on top of itself, just like branch. And you start layering up and getting some really cool effects here. So you see this one's got, it's got a gap of 0. So we could increase the gap on that one, but increase the gap on it and all the previous ones as well. So we just say that this one also has 0 gaps. Now everything gets equal gaps again. And now very art directably, I was able to tell this, pretty much exactly how I wanted it to look. A couple extra splits on that. Maybe we'll just put in like a couple. And then, obviously, this is now just geometry. So if you want to turn this into a floor or something, throw that into a thicken. And now we've got, these big old thick blocks on there. You can imagine cloning this a bunch of times, getting a massive pile of bricks of some sort. I mean, obviously it would just be a cube, but I haven't specifically done this. But if let's make it real thick. Hopefully this works. You never know if I'm going to crash something, but we'll say that's super thick. Throw it into a cloner. Clone 1, 1, and 10. And then tell them to only be 22 apart from each other. So now you see I got a stack of them. And if I make a duplicate of it, we got 2. Now I'm going to say blend between them. And I'll go back to these and type in a different random seed. So they choose different ones. And now we've got this giant stack of blocks, each of them randomly cut in a whole bunch of different orientations. Now, of course, this is only cutting on a flat plane for what we've got set up here. And I might grab both of these and just go a little bit easy on the cut. So I'll say X times 0.5. So now we get half the number of cuts on everything. And I did that because in theory, I'm going to put that into I'm going to put in the connect. That might be an unnecessary step. Actually, it is an unnecessary step because I'm going to instead throw this directly into, now that they're existing, I'll throw into a Voronoi fracture. And the Voronoi fracture, I'll say, hey, you have no sources. And if there's no source on a Voronoi fracture, it's now exploded each of these out into a clone, its own kind of individual clone. And you could use a regular fracture for that. I just like using the Voronoi fracture. And it's not going to run super fast. So I'm going to, again, decrease my cuts, X times 0.5. Cool. So now there's even fewer. Just because I wanted to, for fun, throw a bullet rigid body tag, make a floor, collide with the floor, and let's see what happens. Whee! Boom! And look all the thickness on there by stacking them up in that way. So that's pretty fun. I dig that. That's not a use case I've specifically done before. So, I mean, I guess I'll save that one because it's kind of a neat rig. Partition. So jumping this into a file, let's simplify again, go back to actually, let's just start from scratch. Partition. Now, a couple things to note. This doesn't have to be. I put this on a nice clean plane so we can see exactly what's going on. It doesn't have to be. Now, keep in mind, it's only subdividing the surface. I could drop it on a cube, and now you can see it's making cuts on it, but it's not like it's a volume of it. Essentially, each individual polygon that got exploded and then is starting to get these cuts in it. So it's still completely hollow, but it looks pretty neat. Even here, look at these like neat gaps and stuff we can build into it. Make more cuts. Make a pretty cool looking cube. There, just before anybody asks, there's no way of inverting. There's no way to get like only what was left behind. That's just not the way the algorithm that we built worked. So you have to probably extrude it and then do like a Boolean subtraction. We could put some animation in there, wiggle those around. Yeah, so pretty cool. I mean, you could drop that on any geometry. But the important thing to note is we are subdividing every individual polygon. So if this cube was already subdivided 5 by 5, you see that those 5 by 5s are there, and now we're just cutting even more on top of it. So we're kind of limited to where the geometry was already existing. Now, a setting that is great, but you got to be careful with. So I'm going to go easy, say 3 by 3 by 3. So that's my raw geometry. Right now, we're saying we are cutting 100. Let's just say we're cutting exactly 100 times. But I could say, actually, I'm going to lower that. I'm going to say I'm cutting 10 times. You can see a couple. There's going to be exactly throughout this entire thing. There's going to be a cut there. There's a cut here. And in total, there'll be 10 of those. But the checkbox that says per polygon. So if I turn that on, every single polygon is now getting 10 cuts. That's not actually technically true. We're doing the calculation of how many cuts there should be total. It doesn't mean that they're always going to be applied to the exact polygon. They're getting distributed amongst the entire thing. Let's is there any other little demos I want to do here? I mean, yeah, it will subdivide triangles. It will actually, it subdivides the triangles and the quads and then subdivides them. Cool. And yeah, you can do some cool stuff where you can like intelligently cut the largest one, cut the smaller one. We got different, orientations for the UVs, gap, randomized order, just different ways of dealing with it. I think that covers most of what I wanted to talk about on it. Like there's a lot of cool stuff you can potentially build with it. I've used it to build some city stuff. I think the scene file might be broken. There's a bug in capsules that maybe is fixing the updated version, but I don't have the updated version. But well, I can at least show you the thumbnail. It wasn't the simplest rig, but I was able to via just capsules like build up this little city, and then I started using MoGraph tools to actually I can show you that bit. If I make a bunch of copies, if we yeah, I think if I just take this and now I throw actually, could I just throw not a polygon FX, but a MoGraph extrude, and I'll put that after the partition modifier. You can't use fields with any capsule stuff right now, but now that we're out of the field, now we just use a extrude. I'll say only do one step, and we'll say full scale. And I'll say that, but now we have these effectors. So now I can grab the effector and we'll feed in an effector. And I'll say that the effector will push up the direction that the extrude is doing. And now I can say, okay, effector, I want you to be based on the spherical field. And now we can do a full-on spherical field. And now you can see I'm getting kind of this interesting, all this geometry getting created. And if I do enough subdivisions, and let's not go density crazy, but we'll do some random offsets. And then I get some bigger ones, some smaller ones. Well, even here's where I would probably stack stuff up. Let me turn that off. So I'll do it just like actually I'll say no randomness there, and I'll change my cut algorithm to always cut the largest one. And you see everything, no matter how much randomness I put in here, we get some bigger ones, but you see everything starts feeling a little bit more evenly subdivided. I do like the way that this look is a little bit more. But yeah, now I can get kind of random, but also not too small. And now reactivate this a little bit more even. And then I would remap this back into here, make a curve. And let's really arc that down. And then sort of you can build out what starts looking a little bit like a downtown. So plane is pushing up a little far, so we'll lower that. And then in the extrude, we'll also feed in a random. I use effectors so rarely these days. I'll make a random effector, and this will be pushing. It is just moving on Y. Oh no, I guess we're moving on based on the effector. So, yeah. So let's make sure that those are. I guess that wanted to go negative. That's weird. Actually, I'm a little confused what that's doing. It's based on random. I'm going to set it to be based on noise and make it really tiny. Yeah, I don't know why that was being a little weird. But yeah, if we go easy on the distance of this thing, you see I add a little bit of variation on the height. And then the partition has the not random offset, but the gap. So I can like make that larger and kind of get some roads going in there. And yeah, by getting crazy with nodes, you can start doing things where you like randomly deselect certain things, select other things, and you can make certain things taller and more complicated and empty fields and whatnot. But yeah, being able to layer all that up in kind of a very random way. Pretty fun. I like it. I'll give that one a save just in case anyone is interested in that one as well. Cool. Saved. Yeah, never really talked about partition. Um, the I mean, honestly, like Rocket Lasso puts a lot of work into these. Essentially, I don't know that we could continue Rocket Lasso as a company if it wasn't for the support that Maxon is giving us. So if you care at all about all the tutorials, the free live streams, and our ability to continue trying to even make and support our plugins, then you should be supporting the idea that Rocket Lasso is doing this. So, that would be appreciated because, you know, putting a bunch of work into this stuff and then having certain people just endlessly complain about it is very disheartening. But yeah, it makes it so that I very rarely talk about the capsules publicly because, yeah, there's people who like to complain. Does the sound effect, going back to the previous thing, we've got, does the sound effector have a better sensitivity? It's a fine question. Um, so the rig that we are working with here is quite messy. So when you say sensitivity, I mean, essentially everything's all about these probes. So it's like drawing these boxes. You can draw more than one box. We could cover everything. Like I said, it turns into like the percentage that's filled here. And it's not just a percentage filled as it goes through. You see there's that little teeny dotted line there. So right now, this is based, well, this is saying frequency. We could also be looking at the volume. And then you can see, is it sampling from the peak? So you see that little line, this blue line? So I was wrong. The blue line was looking at the peak of that. But instead, we could be like, don't look at the peak, look at the average of it. So now, maybe it needs a frame to calculate. Actually, that was showing. Oh, okay. So now you can see the line is very low. So I think this is sort of the percentage filled of it. So right now, the overall, it seems like a lot of that is empty. So the line is pretty dang low. So you can sample the average. You can, I'm not sure what step means in this particular instance, but you've got things like decay built in, the strength. I don't play with the sound often. Like I'm just not driving things with sound very often. So I'm not an expert in those, but there are quite a few settings in order to control this. And even here, distribution. I don't. Oh, I think this makes a new one. Maybe no. But yeah, even this distribution, like I don't even know what that does because I don't use it very often. Let's see. Does anybody have any other specific questions? Because we were starting to wrap up on a lot of these. Lignazio had a question about how would we approach detailed ripples like this with secondary waves? Oh goodness. Okay, so here's the here's our reference. So it's a photo. It looks like it's a snake. There's a snake swimming in across the surface of the water. Keep in mind that first of all, there's a photo via maybe it doesn't seem to play, and you see a bunch of other similar photos. But keep in mind, this is from Eden Convey. But the resolution, you can see the resolution of these ripples. Look how tiny, tiny, tiny these resolutions get on these edges. we would need that level of resolution in order to get something that detailed. If it wasn't that, then you'd need some sort of insanely advanced shader that like is calculating shader wise. Um, Near the end of my time at Grayscale Gorilla was when fields and field forces and stuff with vertex maps was really starting to work. And I had kind of gone crazy coming up with like some really cool ripple effects where stuff like actually kind of reacted to objects in the surface of the water. You kind of get all sorts of overlap. And none of them were designed to be like, real world physics correct, but they were, they were kind of cool and reactive. Um, so as far as what we see in that photo specifically, I don't even know if I remember my old rig at all. I wonder if it would give us anything like that. But keep in mind, the resolution is going to be way lower. We might see some of the big fat ripples if we're lucky, but we're not going to get those teeny tiny ones. I mean, I guess you could if you if you super duper incredibly subdivided your grid and your vertex map. So let's make a grid. And yeah, that's hopefully we can handle that. And I will give we need a vertex map, and we need some sort of source to be the origin. So I'll just make a spherical field, not a bad way to start. And I'll even just make it full power, shrink it down. And ultimately, we'll wait a little bit. I was going to say we could immediately make it deform, and so we're seeing the deformation happen. But let's just view it as a vertex map for now and see if I can remember any of this. So how did the tricky part's going to be the fading. I'll say that right now. So I'm going to say add a freeze on top of it, clear out what's coming, and we're going to set that to grow. And it's got a decent radius, and we'll put the effect strength down a little bit. Hit play. And yeah, now you can see that we kind of got this growth effect going. But how do we make it fade? It's like I'm going to have to go back and watch my own tutorial because Eric is mentioning that you could potentially do the same thing just with cloth sim. That would be, I'm going to continue this one, but after I'm done, not looking up any reference, we'll tinker with cloth and see if that can do it, because there could be some possibilities with cloth. So anyway, this is growing, but can we fade it out? So could we like do something like set this to normal, make a solid and have it be faint? And I need to, maybe we need that to move out of the way. Yeah, see, that's not fading out fast enough. How do I want to do this? Let's keyframe that to exist. And then 5 frames later, it's going to have moved over here. That should give us a couple little steps. Boop, boop, boop. And they're all growing. So now here, we've got the solid set to normal. Yeah, so, okay. Maybe this is kind of the thing. So essentially, we've got a growth happening, but I'm also saying to fade out because we get this solid. The solid is set to 0%. Keep in mind, red here just means 0%, and yellow means 100%. So without this, you can see that we get this effect and it's constantly growing out. But now I'm making this solid and it's just kind of overlaying on top of it. So every frame it's saying, well, erase out 12% of it, like, drag whatever value are down 12%. So you see that those are fading out. So you get this kind of solid burst and they grow, but they fade. Now, if it's growing faster than the fade can happen, then it's not going to fade. If I lower this, and maybe it will, but like if I lower this fade down to 6%, like you see the fading isn't strong enough to counteract it. So it's sort of, I'm kind of just putting some arbitrary numbers in there, but you see that one, this one is growing, but now you can see it's fading a little bit more slowly. And this is a balancing act based on how much new information we're feeding in via like wherever this plane field is. And then we've got the freeze field, which is adding in an effect. And actually this might be that's maybe the magic number. The effect strength is at 10%. And now our solid is slightly stronger than that. So if my effect strength was 20%, let's do a test. If I set this to 20%, does my solid effect have to be slightly over that? So now if I say 19%, you see that wasn't, did I type in the number in the wrong spot? No, it just seems to grow really fast. Let me hit clear just to make sure. Okay, I'm not. Oh, sorry, my bad. I set the value up. I needed to change the percentage. So if we change our blending to 19%, we're saying spread out a certain amount. No, it still fades, so it's not a direct correlation. Yeah, that's still faded out. So yeah, it goes back to, we're just kind of guessing, checking here. So yeah, we can set this to various numbers, and you see right there, it was enough to fade up. At 16%, it's not quite enough, but yeah, at 18%, it is enough for it to slowly start fading out. So you can see that these grow and then fade. Now that works well. Let's just call this one, I'm just gonna call this one input. And I'll duplicate that vertex map. And this one, let's just say ripple. I'll say ripple 1 and delete. Okay, now we feed in the very first vertex map. I can even say, hey, feed it in as the index. So it's a direct translation 1-to-1. So now you see that this new one is exactly the same thing. But now we start taking this information and remapping it. So how do I want to remap it? Like we could just do a curve. So, you know, keeping it as simple as possible, we do that. So if we let that play through, now that wasn't quite what I was expecting. I guess they fade. Maybe I just need more layers of it. So I've kind of got this little bump. If you didn't know, you can select all your points, right click and say double, and then double again. I'm not sure what this will do. Yeah, okay, so that's sort of doing something. It would need more incoming blur probably. So I can say, hey, don't just to, you know, don't come in just as the index, come in as an average. That's going to blur them down a little bit to make it a little rounder. Yeah, it's a little bit better. A little more blur will make it smoother. And hopefully the circles maintain a little bit more. So you can see that those ripples kind of faded out and eventually they all go away. And then let's see, what would I do here? So yeah, now you see them mapping several times. So we get kind of that rippling effect, and I can think of better ways to do this curve, I think, but now we just feed in that input again. So I'll take this exact same input, hold down control and duplicate it and say multiply. So now you see we get these ripples. We get the ripples, but they're faded out on the edges. So let's see if we can get it to grow a little bit faster. I'll increase the radius. Oh, yeah. So we click on this one. So now we get those ripples. Maybe there's some detail might not be doing it. Honestly, we got further on this than I thought we would. But yeah, now you can see we kind of get these ripples going. They're doing all right. So then that's fine. I'm going to add in a second sphere. We'll say that that one's going to add to it. And this one, I'm free to just move around. So I can start dragging, reset transform. So keep in mind this vertex map. And yeah, now you see those are consistent because they're just sitting there. But if I were to start moving this around, yeah, look, Now we get this lovely tail kind of traveling outward from it, getting bigger as it fades away. So it's a pretty cool effect, like layering these things up the way I just did. And you see we start getting these cool rippling effects. Now, I mean, I'm not going to go any further on this one, really. But yeah, I mean, all that's why I love vertex maps, and we could do all this stuff like 8 years ago, where like these things just layered up so nicely. Now we could do all sorts of delays and decays, and layer up all the different. Layer up a bunch of different bits of information underneath so these can live longer. The growth is working pretty well. You can see these drifting out in a pretty reasonable thing. The one thing I've got is that they're not traveling outward. I wonder if I go to this curve and I give it some animation speed and we say loop. There we go. Okay. So now essentially imagine that this spline that I've got right here is constantly traveling to the right. I told it to loop. So essentially this is going to just keep on traveling to the right again and again and again and forever. Going a little bit fast right now. So let's lower this down. That might be an optical illusion. Interesting. If the stream is going through fast enough, I'm getting this very, very rapid oscillating, like it's happening real quick. And continue. No, we don't want continue. We definitely want loop. Oh, I always forget. This animation speed is it's very unintuitive because it's actually backwards. This is saying how long is it going to take? How many frames does it take for this entire animation to travel all the way back around again? So these tiny, I keep thinking a lower number makes it go slower, but bigger numbers make it go slower. I'm going to say it's going to take 90 frames for it to go all the way around the loop. Okay, cool. So, I can't believe we haven't saved it yet. So for A, it's fun like rediscovering something I haven't done in like 8 years. So ripples vertex map. Cool. So now we hit play. Now we got these ripples constantly traveling outward, and now I'm free to grab this and start moving around. And it should still be doing exactly that same thing, but they're all traveling outward. And we didn't even need any keyframes on that. So yeah, that's pretty fun. And I think I'd even done tricks like right now, if I move slowly, that works really well. But if you go quick, it's going to start kind of skipping around, which maybe you like that effect. Maybe that works. But if you wanted to not do it that way, you could have a tracer tracing this object around. And then instead of it actually referencing this object, it'll reference that tracer. So if you move really fast, it'll make a really long tail. So, keep in mind that that's like an additional thing you can do. So anyway, now we got this constantly moving out ripple. Like I said, I mean, actually, this is working really well because if we think about that snake we just saw, give this a little bit of time to reset. That snake we just saw, if we have this kind of slither back and forth, like essentially that's what we're seeing. Like this is working very well, but in order for you to get the tiny little ripples working, we just need like way more resolution on this plane, which is not an easy thing to get. Like I'm quite pleased that we're getting this good of a frame rate here in the viewport thanks to the new laptop. But now let's make this actually kind of do something for real. And that means let's deform this plane. This one, I'm actually going to make the reference plane. Ref. And then we'll just make a duplicate of it. So that way we're just not dealing with the vertex maps doing feedback loops or anything like that. So we'll just call this one the actual water. This one we don't need to view. Maybe, maybe it would do because this won't let us see the vertex map. I'm not even sure if this will work. Well, it's visible and we still don't see the vertex map, right? Because this one's intersecting. So if I wanted to see feedback, I might like move that one down like a teeny little hair, just so if I do select this vertex map, I can see it. But this one won't render. Anyway, now we'll make a plane effector. We'll call it a plane dot deform. Deform based on the effector direction. Say it should deform the point. You see everything pushed upward. I'm going to say deform only 10 units, so it just goes up a little bit. And it's going to go up a little bit based on what? Based on this vertex map. Now, again, it's going to default to nearest. We could say index, and that's just direct 1-to-1. We can also say based on the average, which will just blur the incoming one a little bit, which is slower, but it could give you a smoother end result. But for now, we'll just do index. And I'll make a subdivision surface set to 1-by-1. Let's hide this one for a moment. Now you can see these ripples coming through really nice, especially with the smoothing from the subdivision surface. And just to make it look real nice, let's drop that on, make it dark, super shiny. And now we've got a liquidy effect. So now, yep, that's playing nice and smooth for us. I can grab this, drag it around, and look at that. Some nice, fun, real-time ripples here right in the viewport. I can't believe we got that going so smoothly. There seems to be, maybe it's just a viewport. Like as I drag it, I'm seeing a little bit of jitter, but as soon as I let go, it's not jittering. So it's probably just some sort of like feedback loop. I mean, one thing I should keep in mind is that's happening first, so I should move that down. Just that order of operations can always help a little bit potentially. But yeah, still getting a little bit of jitter, but and I remember, I think I had done things like you can push this even further by layering up extra things. Like we could technically put a smooth in there and smooth it out, but just for fun, let's add a jiggle deformer in there. Jiggle, 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 jiggle. I'm not even sure if I'll be able to get a good setting in here for it to do something, but we'll put a jiggle and I'll say very little stiffness, which maybe is all I really need. And let's just see if that, yeah, because now you can see we kind of get these secondary effects going. So yeah, you can get things that look a little bit more detailed by letting the jiggle do some of that. And I'm not sure what the best settings for jiggle would be here. Maybe you say like 1% stiffness, very little structure. I think structure is what returns it. Yeah, I think structural returns it to its original shape. So you see now that these don't even want to fade back to where they were. But if we give it some fade, get rid of the drag is going to slow it down as well. And now even here, you see these ripples themselves are creating like a lot of like fun secondary motion. So yeah, that's just, it makes it a little bit more organic, a little bit more alive. And they might intersect and react to each other a little bit better. And then when it comes to that actual reference image, just keep in mind that that is going to be like putting up proper water material on here, going from above and probably rendering like the caustics from it or the shadow. I guess it would pretty much be the caustics. So we're clearly not going to do that because caustics take forever to render. But yeah, some caustics on here would probably do the effect that you're looking for. So let's rename this to Move Me and give that one a save. Yeah, hopefully that one answers that bit of the question. Now, somebody said that there was a tutorial that was doing a similar effect using cloth. I'm not going to watch that tutorial. I will actually never watch the tutorial. I will never watch the tutorial. I pretty much don't watch any Cinema 4D tutorials ever because I don't want to be influenced or be accidentally stealing somebody else's stuff. So what did I just click? Viewport solo animation. I don't even know what that does. So yeah, without looking at a reference, the idea of using cloth to do liquidy things, like we've definitely done some things along those lines, but let's just see what happens if we explore it a little bit. So I'm going to say no gravity. Yes, simulation scene, 0 gravity. And we'll make this cloth, simulation cloth. I'm going to say it is very bendy. And I'm even going to say it's very stretchy, just to start out with. And we can do it with forces. I don't know. I pretty much don't want to do it with forces, but let's see what happens if we do use forces. So what I'm thinking is just imagine that we've got a sphere and it's supposed to be that this physical sphere is colliding with it. Actually, now that I think about it, we could just make it a physical sphere that's colliding with it. So let's do that. Let's say collider. and 999, and immediately save it because we're doing simulations, and that's inherently risky. Cloth. Well, let's keep it similar. Ripples. Cloth. Okay, so I'm going to essentially, I'm going to hit play. I'm going to start bopping it, and the bopping will work. I imagine it will work, but the whole thing will slowly start drifting downward. So I'm expecting it to be not doing everything, but let's see if we're getting something. Okay, yeah, they're initialized. So not the fastest thing, but there we go, boop. And we go boop. And we go boop. So that's already working nicely. You see those collisions are working fine, but there's nothing to return it back to its position. So we've got two options. And my first thought, I don't know if it's a good idea, but my first thought is just this could be real simple. Under mix animations, I'll say with the forces, constantly try and return it back to its original position. Let's see what happens with a strength of 1, which is pretty weak. And then we'll just boop it. Boop. Boop. I said boop. You see it is just returning. It's kind of like a really good version of the collision. The collision deformer. Okay, we'll make this way weaker. 0.1. Okay, so now let's start it over. And now say boom. And yeah, now that goes back. So now it is going to, you can see it's rippling outward pretty well. Boop. And the boop. And the boop. And yeah, eventually it's going to return back to its original position. Now, I'm kind of colliding with it here, and because I can, let me show you, I can break it easily by going and doing something like that. It's going to break. So I tend not to run my simulations with a proper collision. So I'm going to delete the collision off of there, and instead create a wind. So we'll say simulation. Simulation wind. Tell the wind to aim downward. I'm essentially booping it down. Potentially, I could make it even fancier than that. But I'm going to say there's a wind. I'm going to say the wind strength is pretty strong. And if we were to hit play right now, let's see what happens. It initializes, and then it's not as strong as I thought it would be. So I'll say 500. There we go. So now I see it's really strong blowing down. And then I'm going to say, okay, but now you are going to, I shouldn't have reset. Let's just rotate that back now. I'm going to say, but you are now limited via a spherical fall off. And actually, a little bit of fall off on here is not a bad thing. So I'll shrink that down like that. And now you see there is no collision. There's no collider tag on there. But with that fall off combined, now if I move this and hopefully, now, well, okay, we need to make it way stronger. But now you can see I can touch it, and it is reacting because it's a similar shaped fall off. And keep in mind we could fall off based on the geometry of the sphere, but that's slower to calculate. But yeah, this needs to be a real strong. So the wind speed is going to be 500. Wait, maybe I scaled something down and it scaled down the wind strength. Let's see. Better. Boop. But now you can see I'm free to like drag this through it, and it's not like going crazy. So let's make that 3 times stronger. Yeah, so now I'm kind of free to drag this around, and I'm getting a similar kind of rippling effect to what I had before. And I can't make it explode now because ultimately it's just a little bit of wind blowing down on it. So that is with us using that force to return it. Now, well, this is what I would have done anyway, but I can't pretend I didn't see, I think Twirl's message. Was it Twirl? But somebody said that the reference was using wind blowing up and wind blowing down or something along those lines. And that is going to give us a better version, which is what I would have gone to next. But, I did see the message. So pretty much what we want to do is I'm going to get rid, well, maybe we'll put some drag on there, but yeah, we'll get rid of the mix animation. And that'll be back in a world where this is going to push down, and it'll just keep on pushing down forever. So we don't want to push down forever. I do want to Okay, I appreciate everybody in the chat trying to help out by giving hints. But if you've watched the tutorial and you're just telling me what they did in the tutorial, we're just copying somebody else's tutorial. You should be watching their tutorial. So I super appreciate, and it's good intent, but don't tell me. But anyway, the point here is if we make a wind that is always blowing up, and we'll be able to do different strengths here. A wind that's always blowing up, if anything, oh, and then we make a fall off, obviously. So we're going to say, and I always do it backwards, but we'll make a linear fall off, face it on, because it's already rotated. We have to do this kind of this weird one, and I'll flatten that down. So yeah, there's a fall off here saying always blow up. Now, if I hit play, is it going to blow everything right away? Yes, because I got it backwards, so we'll say Z minus. Yeah, okay, so now it only blows up if it pushes down into it. And then we make a second wind, and we hit R for rotate, and we spin the whole thing downward, and you see also the fall off is spinning around with it. So now there's a wind that's blowing up and a wind that's blowing down, but you only get blown up if you go down, and you only get blown down if you go up. So this is going to be essentially constantly incentivizing the cloth to always go back to its original, like, well, it's trying to always get back to Y. So if I were to, yeah, you see the wind right there, it blows up and it blows down. And as each part is going to, essentially what's good about this part of the method is it's going to overshoot as it blows up. It's going to overshoot as it blows down. So if I were to take this and start moving it around, we're going to kind of get this fun rippling effect going where you get all this churn. Now, I almost do, well, okay, so I said that there's a lot of bend and there's a lot of stretchiness, which is probably good. Soft body, that won't do anything. Balloon won't do anything. Forces, yeah, I think, is there drag? Yeah, they never added drag here, but we do have drag here. Usually you need huge, or depending on the object, you need huge numbers. Putting some drag in here would slow it down, or you could use possibly a friction field. But I think it's actually fading out relatively quickly, so I don't think we actually need that. And I think it mostly turns in if we select the two different bits of wind. If we make it really strong, do we get quicker ripples? Well, we're getting some crazy oscillation going. Keep in mind that's not necessarily surprising because I think, yeah, these two fall offs are both pushing up and down at the same time, so they're always getting some forces. So it might be good for the wind that's pushing up. That one will be slightly down, and the one that's pushing down will be slightly up. So it's kind of like this dead zone in between where it's kind of calm. Now, that's not to say that it won't still oscillate, but that I think would be a variable. Boop, 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 boop. Okay, that's cool. I mean, yeah, we're kind of getting some ripple stuff going there. Now, it's very rapidly reacting one direction or the other, and that's all based on our wind strength. So if we tell this wind to chill out and be weaker, immediately see the whole thing calming down quite a bit. And now I'll run, I'm having very bad aim here. Now I can run this along and you see that those are reacting. Are we missing detail that we could add? Like I kind of like these oscillating and taking a little bit of time to calm down. A little bit of mix animation could potentially be a good idea, just to make sure it didn't drift off. But because I'm doing my trick where the wind is not colliding, it's actually just blowing down, I think it pretty much means that where it's not drifting around in space. But yeah, that's reacting quite nicely. And I mean, there wasn't all the math that we just had from our vertex map. So I like that. And then, yeah, as Tobias said, another jiggle would probably add on to this. And yeah, that's a deformer tag. So this would layer up on top of that. Go easy on the stiffness. Go easy on the structural. Yeah, you'd want to find like the right frequency, because right now it's adding in some chop. Yeah, that's nice. But yeah, I mean, if jiggle being too strong or too weak, both of those could give like detrimental effects. But it's decently reactive. There are a lot of settings that we could be potentially playing around with here. I don't feel like we actually need the drag. The bendiness, I'm just curious what happened. Let's drop the bendiness way down and say 0 stretch. I just want to see, how that's different. Yeah, because it's not stretching as much. But now, just by changing that setting, the ripples feel like they're traveling outward a lot more. And I bet stretch actually has a lot to do with that. If I say it's really stretchy, then now that's free to stretch downward. And yeah, because of stretching downward, the bend didn't have to happen, and there's a lot less in this particular case. It feels like there's a less of a vibe of the ripple. I can actually say 0. And even when you say 0, there's still decently some. But now you see it's like very reactive. It's shallow, but it's reactive. So different bend amounts, I think, are going to have dramatic effects. Yeah, so I think bend and stretch are going to be the most important settings for this reacting one way or another. I'm not entirely sure, Twirl, if you mean increase the size. I'm assuming you mean increase the size of this plane, but keep in mind, as we increase the size of the plane, we're going to be losing. That's interesting. T for scale. Oh, look at that. It doesn't. Is it jiggle maybe? Oh yeah, it was jiggle. Okay. I thought the simulation was stopping me from scaling it. If I make it twice the size, keep in mind that's double that direction, double that direction. That means this now has, I think, 1/4 the density of polygons. So yeah, it's physically larger. That should recover quickly. Yeah. It's physically larger, but calculation wise, there's less resolution for it to work with. So like it's bigger and maybe the ripples go out further, but there's less for it to play with. And kind of the only thing we can do is keep on increasing the resolution, which, keep in mind those numbers are multiplied on top of each other. So that I expect to start getting significant slowdown. Taking quite a while to initialize. Yeah, now we got the resolution just by increasing the resolution, that already is looking more liquidy. So I imagine, an even higher resolution is going to give you better, denser ripples going on. But yeah, I dig it. I can't really think of anything to add to that. The target length on the parameter tag, yeah, I mean, that would technically scale. If we tell this to be twice as big, I think the whole thing scales up, I think. I'm not even sure what that's. Yeah, it's probably a bad idea. They're all super colliding. I'd want to keyframe it up into a new position. Yeah, I mean, technically we could make it a little bit larger by telling that to scale, but are we getting anything from that? It'll make it bigger, but I don't think that would actually be different. I mean, it might be kind of a cool initial ripple effect. Yeah, so you get that kind of fun initial ripple going on. And yeah, I think it would eventually just balance itself out. I could see maybe making a random, or even making a turbulence. I wouldn't really want to make a turbulence, maybe a wind that's blowing like up and down, so that you could get a little bit of choppy water going, generally speaking, and then you could kind of run on top of it, which mostly would just translate to making a wind that, I'll just say vertical. We'll make a vertical wind. I'll make it overly strong so we can modify it and give it a random field. This is quite large of a scene, so I'm immediately going to make this about 2000 in scale, animate the speed, hit play, and let's just see if that does anything. Initializing. This is just initializing for the GPU with all those polygons. So yeah, there we can see the scale very clearly. Now it's very strong. Drop it down to 333. Let's see how quickly that recovers. If it overlaps itself, I could see it having trouble returning to its position. We could put a little bit of mix animation in there to gently want to bring it back. And yeah, you're definitely feeling the you're definitely feeling, I forgot what I was going to say, sorry. But yeah, now you see I got these ripples just kind of generally blowing around. So it tries to blow up and it blows back down again. So, now in general, let me pause that. Save, steal this material. Paste. Boop. Boop, boop. And go. So yeah, now we generally get some ripples blowing around just so it's not a perfect surface. We can already see this reacting to the sphere. And, we can still get our ripples layering up on top of it. So, pretty cool effect. And, I think for your general average artist, it's going to be better to have a rig that doesn't require like all that that relatively complex vertex map stuff with all the fields. But yeah, I dig it. That's as far as I'm going to go on this cloth one, unless there's a specific question about it. Actually, we are very close to being at the end of the stream, and I do have something happening a little bit later this evening, so I'm going to need to not go too long. So let's just see if there's any wrap-up questions before we go. Toril, what would be the point of increasing the length by 1 or 2%? I mean, yeah, it creates those nice little burst of initial ripples, but that's not realistic, right? Like, this wind, I think, would be a little bit more realistic for getting some choppiness in the water. Okay, appreciate YouTube. Appreciate you, John. Yeah, cloth. Why doesn't vertex map animation work with Alembic? Does it not? With freeze grow, the sphere fall off doesn't work. Are you, if you're still here, Lucky, are you saying if I went back to my vertex map version of this and did an Alembic bake that it wouldn't bake that? Or are you saying something else? Extra detail based on a vertex map. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not following what you mean, Toril. Yeah, even here you see it's kind of missing that resolution a little bit if you skip around really fast. So for this rig, I'll show you that vertex map trick. So instead of using the spherical field, I'll delete that. And actually, let's visualize this. Yeah, let's visualize it by making a vertex map temporarily. And yeah, no, I'm sorry. I'm trying to, I'm going to steal off my tag so I don't have to disable it. And then I can now add a vertex map. It's going to be a high resolution, but it should handle it. Vertex map, cool. And now sphere, MoGraph, tracer. So now we're tracing it. I don't want to trace all the points. So I'll say don't trace vertices. So now it's just tracing the axis from the end. I don't know. We'll say for 1 second. So then, yeah, inside our vertex map, just for a visualization example, we'll say radius. Actually, let's do radius and along. We don't do that very often. And how big is the sphere? The sphere is about 20. So we'll say I want the radius to be about 20. Or maybe, is that radius? Okay, yeah, there's a radius. Honestly, I'm not even sure now. So if I move this, yeah, so now we get that line. Okay, yeah. So so it's exactly what I was hoping it would be. I probably wouldn't make it last for a whole. This tracer's lasting too long. So from end, even just 5 frames looking at this. But you see now it's full strength where the sphere is, and it fades off so it can keep on having more effect. So essentially, I think that's just what we need it to be. So I'll copy that, put it back on the one we're not using, steal back our tag here. And now the wind, the fall off is not based on the sphere anymore. It's now going to be based on that exact same math. So I'll paste it in, identical, and now we've got this force pushing down based on the tracer. So it's a fake on the sphere, but it's a fake that's going to make it so that everything's going to, I hope, hopefully react way better. So that initializes. And now as I drag this around, yeah, look at this beautiful tail that we're getting now. Instead of all those little kind of blips of a sphere, now we've got this line that's getting referenced. And even that line could, maybe you can see if I move quickly, it's kind of getting to be a little janky because we're losing resolution because I move fast. There, it's all still moving. It's not choppy, but it's a little bit jagged because of those sharp edges. So if we go to our tracer and say, you're not linear anymore, you'll be a B spline with what doesn't really matter. I'll say uniform points. And pretty much we just need something real smooth. So now just look at the line I'm tracing. So now you see the line I'm tracing is curvy. And that curve will essentially translate to the ripples that are getting pushed along. Wee. I dig it. I dig it. Do, 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 do. Excellent. Yeah, I like it. Two completely different methods to get a similar effect. I mean, right. As far as reactive, I kind of like this one a little bit more. Like it feels a little bit more alive, and they're drifting off more. And I think I do like this one more because we have more control over the elements. Like right now, I can move this around. It's reacting really quickly for one. Well, it's got fewer polygons, so that's not fair. But we've got the jiggle. Obviously, the other one has jiggle as well. But this one has so many controls within our settings here. Like how big is the fall off? How big is the radius going to be? Right now, I could increase this radius further. I don't know what I'll do, but let's say that the radius is going to increase by 40. And let's just look at what the reaction ends up being. And for the most part, I expect this overall effect to go further out than we currently are. So as I drag, I got to make sure to grab the correct axis. It's a bad angle for it. Okay. Nope. It's not letting me. Why is it not letting me grab the green? I can grab this one and move it around. And we just have this, see this bigger radius traveling around. But that's now just a really easy control that we can go in and say, oh, we're going to manipulate the radius of the freeze. We can make it way down, 1. And now, let's see. Yeah, now you see the effect is a little bit more localized. So we get that control. And then I really like my favorite bit of control, I think. We'll go back to what I had as default. We have this be spreading out faster. That'll give us a little bit less fall off, but let's just see what happens. If we make this bigger, yeah, you see it grows really fast. We can make it go slower. So yeah, now the ripples would be kind of not spreading out quite as quick. Again, let's go back to what we kind of had as a default, which seemed to be working. But now we can go into this one, and we've got these ripples, which I'm intentionally mapping. First of all, we could potentially double, if we had enough resolution, we could double those again and visually see more ripples at any given time. I'll undo it, but let's double it again. We just don't have the resolution, but you see how we would see like even more ripples. And I'm just controlling that here via these controls. I mean, everything's reacting relatively well. Let's try doubling. Well, it's actually quadrupling our resolution. It's funny how it tiled. Something's getting confused there. One of the vertex maps is not refreshing, and I'm not quite sure how to force it to refresh. That's funny, the way it's tiling. But that feels like we're playing with fire. I'm not going to mess with that for now. We'd have to find some way to force it to refresh. And I didn't undo the, dang it. I'm going to hit undo a few times because I meant to, oh yeah, undo to get this back to not quite so many. There we go. But then the other thing I was going to say is the control I really like is we have this animation speed. So we don't have to type in any, we don't even have to keyframe anything. I can just type in, like right now, these are traveling out. I can say, hey, I want this to go twice as fast. So we say 45 frames. And now the jiggles, I'm going to turn off jiggle just so we see it. So you see look at this very clean math, essentially, that's happening. Like very simply, those are all moving outward. We have control over the fall off here. Like I can turn this off and now you see that these ripples actually will travel at full power forever along the entire thing. But by multiplying the value coming back in again on top of itself, we can fade that out. We could be remapping, go inside of here, enable remapping, and go to the curve. And now I've got this curve that I could say, hey, I want this to be, look how I can like artistically say, no, I want to fade out more on the edge. So as ripples happen, I can say, no, those should really get low as they go. And yeah, look, now it's really calmed down on this outer part. So yeah, the ability to like art direct this and layer them up like really cleanly. Like I really dig the ability to do that. Yeah, this fade out is really nice now. And then can we get the overall ripples getting applied to this as well as ripples? Why not give it a go? Is like right now we are inputting this as the freeze. Well, that's the fade out. I don't know. Let's just see. I'm going to make a noise. I'm not sure where to put it in the hierarchy is the trick. I'm going to say add animation speed, scale, make it pretty big. And let's just see what this does. Oh, okay, interesting. I'm going to unclamp. And that's very strong right now, so we're going to go easy percentage-wise. I'm going to set to normal. And it feels like a little, you ever at a lake or something and like little bugs are skittering across? It kind of feels like that right now. 100% is just going to take over. Also, it's possible you want to put it under the freeze. So I'm going to add that on top of our ripple. Yeah, that one maybe feels like the correct one. I'm going to slow down. It's quite large. There's quite the maybe that makes sense, that oscillation happening, because the oscillation is happening here, but it goes to like, maybe this shouldn't even be existing in this one. Maybe it should be in this one where we've got these inputs going, and then we'll say, okay, but then on top of that, we're going to get this nice slow moving thing happening as well. We'll say that's adding to it in an unclamped way. And now we got this kind of just drifting, make it bigger, a little bit faster. Now we just got these overall ripples doing their own thing. And we don't have to worry about those. And now we can start traveling this around, and we still get that rippling effect on the secondary. They're not interacting maybe as realistically there as a simulation, but we're getting the resolution that I want here, these tiny little ripples traveling up and down. This got a little choppy. Is that happening? I don't still have that double, do I? No, they're slower. Oh, I did. Oh, I sped them up. That's what's different here, because we can speed them up even more. We can slow them down. Anyway, yeah, once you build a rig like this, it's hard to not just keep on tinkering and playing around with it, because like it's so cool and so much fun to have it react. Even here, it's like, oh, yeah, I'm dropping in the sphere, but we could be dropping in anything. And like I said, it could even be looking at the shape. We could be dunking a cube into there. I think a cube would be relatively clean. I'll do that. And then we really got to be done. But let's go back to the original source. And I mean, if I was being real smart, we can make a connect object, and then anything we put in the connect object becomes a collider object. So drop in the cube in the collider. And then right now we got the sphere move me. So I drop this in and also say add on top of that. So they're additive. But now I'm going to say I want to calculate based on the surface, and we can give it a radius. And now look at that. I can just increase this. And already you see like a radius coming off of it. Now, it actually probably doesn't need that radius because we've got the radius automatically growing. But now look, it's reacting to this cube. So I can just take this cube and move it around. So we can feed in any shape, and that's what the ripples are going to be generated from. And we could, because I built it this way, I could just duplicate my cube, make a second one, and now those are reacting to it. So it's a really clean rig for being able to modify, um, and even that's with a jiggle turned off. A little smoothing can go a long way. I do love my smoothing deformer. Right now, those ripples are moving a little bit quick, but if we put a smooth after our deform, you can see that'll calm everything down. And yeah, look at that now. Like now we got these waves kind of passing through, but those feel like they're reacting to these shapes because it's taking on the shape a little bit. I dig it. Yeah. Okay. Saved. Vertex map solution. Yeah, I like the vertex map solution better as well. Paul, I would like to see the sort of effect could be used for emulating water or rain rolling down a window. Maybe. Oh, I think I maybe know what you mean. Maybe that'd be something to tackle next week if you ask the question. But like when you've got maybe not water drips, but when you got like a lot of water and your windshield wipers are going and it's kind of like a flat sheet and you kind of get these waves traveling through, like that might be possible. Lazar, related previous thinking. Why doesn't the vertex map animation work with Alembic when freeze grow doesn't? Yeah, baking a vertex map. Oh yeah, Illuminatrix. You can totally do like a boat wake or something like with this type of rig. It just just works well as long as you got the proper amount of subdivisions going on. But yeah, with the question of baking, can we somebody's saying that the vertex map animation doesn't work with Alembic. That I feel like that's sort of a multifaceted question. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, here's the object and here's the vertex maps, and eventually they get transferred over there. So I think if I try and bake this one, and I don't know that this will work, but if we say bake as Alembic, I should shorten the animation just so we're not spending forever. 111. Right click. Bake as Alembic. Okay, that's baking out. We've got this copy. Now, yeah, my understanding is that we get, let's turn those off. We get that. And yeah, well, okay, let's see. Hit play. Yeah, the vertex maps. Yeah, the vertex maps are animated. So here's the Alembic baked with the vertex maps. And I think if we went in here and I replaced that ripple with this one, reactivate. Oh, is that what you're saying? That the baked vertex map isn't being respected. Let's delete that one. The baked vertex map doesn't seem to be getting respected as I link it here. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, so we don't want to use transfer. That makes sense. That is that information. If we add a new vertex map, call it test, can I transfer it to a vertex map on the same object? Seemingly no. So yeah, it seems like Cinema's fields are not seeing a vertex map that was baked. Like when I click on it, it's there. It's all seemingly all the information is there. It might even render in Redshift, but we're not able to transfer that information to a different vertex map. So right now that seems to be a limitation, something they didn't consider. Yeah, nothing is getting it to update. So I think it's just straight up not going to work. So yeah, that'd be a request to send in the Maxon to be like, hey, it's not seeing that. And honestly, it's probably like 3 lines of code and then they could make it work, but it's just not built into it right now. But yeah, if that's what you meant, then yes, you do seem to be correct that that is a limitation. Anyway, we had some really good questions today. I really liked those questions overall. We got to tackle a bunch of fun stuff. We got to do some render stuff. We got to make some stuff look nice in the viewport. Barely even tackled any particle stuff, which is nice. I love particle stuff, don't get me wrong, but we've been doing a lot of particle stuff lately. Anyway, I appreciate everybody coming in and asking all the really great questions, as always. If you want to support on Patreon, it's a great way of just supporting the stuff I do as far as making sure I keep being able to do the live streams and being able to do the free tutorials. And yeah, of course, we got the plugins. All the plugins are the best way to support everything that we do here. But I think actually that should wrap this up. Thanks again, everybody, for hanging out. I will be around next week for a live stream, but not the week after. So that should wrap this one up. And yeah, until next week, bye-bye.